rector, doctor of the University of New Esparta. Good afternoon to all. I am going to be short as I was indicated as a suggestion. Human beings were born to administer their own personal resources and fulfill their necessities. Then evolution, education, the academy taught, and that's where management came up in a very small resume. And that management is not more than accomplishing the objectives with someone else's efforts. That's why we're all here today in what is called the National Council of Sovereignty and Peace. And as our colleague said, it is a reality that exists, that the national sovereignty of peace is inoculated inside of us. That is the most important, with all of the collaboration and the effort of all Venezuelans. I don't count those who say yes or no. I mean all Venezuelans. We are in that electricity, in that feeling that if someone measured today and there was an instrument to measure the pressure, to measure the processes of what each one of us can feel, they're going to realize that the national sentiment is present in each one of us in silence. Even if we have these processes, that is why the university is present today, and in the name of 175 deans that conformate the CNU, not only we accompany this process of sovereignty and peace, not only do we ratificate this process of sovereignty and peace, but we also are part of the process in itself, inside and outside of universities, in each one of the dependencies that correspond to us to act. Someone said something around there, and Cabello talked about the brand of the country. President, the country brand is also many of the professionals that are abroad. To certificate each one of the professions of this country is a national demand of us as the university people, and that is an important country brand. The best doctors, engineers, and that is the truth, and we are representing them, and we need some help. For example, the commitment of Andres Bello, so our psychologists, engineers, and lawyers have opportunities also in the outside to do it. Thank you for giving me this right to speak in the name of all the universities, whether they're public or private. It doesn't matter. We all have one objective: to treat the sentiment that we have, so you know that this sentiment is real in all of the places that we are in this great country. Thank you very much.
We were listening to the statements on behalf of the university's academic representation of the country as part of the Council for Sovereignty and Peace. The representative also said that there is a national sentiment that is present in spite of differences. The representative spoke on behalf of the 175 rectors of the country, of the universities that are accompanying this process of sovereignty and peace, and are doing so not just from within the universities, but also from the outside. This was highlighted by the representative that spoke on behalf of the universities of the country, public and private ones.
University sector of Venezuela for his words of unity and confluence of the Venezuelan being. From over a century ago, Venezuela is the receptor of different forms and people from different migrations that were massive and came here fleeing from war, pain, and the persecution, and who came here with the hope of building themselves a future and of building a small parcel of land where they could build a new home and they have a homeland. And if today we could characterize the way in which Venezuelan men and women throughout these 100 years of history of European migrations, and also from our own continent or the Asian region that came here, if we could characterize it with one single phrase, the phrase that fits the better is with open arms. And with open arms, we'd receive the millions of Italians who came fleeing the war, the Portuguese, the Spanish. We received our brothers and sisters from Colombia, Ecuador, the Chinese, Arabs, Turkish, the Persians who came here looking for a new homeland, and they achieved it with a new home. That is why we want to give the right to speak to the spokesperson for the sector in the National Council for Sovereignty and Peace of Foreign Communities in Venezuela, and it's the engineer Marco Maurizio Mannochio Sicardi. Good afternoon. My name is Maurizio Mannochio, and I have the honor of being the spokesperson for the Italian community in Venezuela. But I also speak for millions of communities of other countries that, like mine, came to this great nation that opened its arms and gave them a future. The history of my family started in the year 1959. After 18 days of sailing in a ship of the coastal line that called the Anase, their eyes saw for the first time the mountains of Venezuela. What they saw captivated them. My mother, with a very innocent mind, as that who meets a new world, said, "Look, Pascal, they have a and they're launching fireworks. How beautiful celebration they have in the middle of July." What they saw was not, it was the humble homes of Venezuelan men and women in the mountains that they were celebrating the day of their independence on July the 5th. In that moment, they realized of what Venezuela was, a nation of celebration and light. When they came down from the boat, they were captivated by something else. There were buses whose drivers were screaming silence and silence. They were confused, and they got on the bus, and no one said a single word until they were in silence. Then, between laughs, they understood that they're not being asked to shut up, but that was the name of the place where they were going. They came here with nothing, but my mother was a seamstress and my father was a mechanic, and they live in a pension in the armed forces where there was one bathroom for 20 rooms. Then they were generous for over 10 years, and when I was born 30 years later, they already had their own house that they didn't owe any money to anyone, and my father had its own workshop. That is not given by any other nation. That is only given by Venezuela. In all of that time, my parents didn't have to go through the poison of the fear of the foreigners or racism. That is very terrible. On the contrary, Venezuelans set them in their tables. They taught them the flavor of an arepa, the smell of ayak in December, but without imposing them or making them forget the perfume of known as pasta. I mean, they let us be Venezuelans, but without forcing us to give up our birth nationality. They allow us to be both. Can anyone be any more generous as a people, as a nation, as a country? My parents left me many things. They left me values, principles. They left me a business. But they also left me with the horror that they never forgot, the horror of the tales of war. I listened from them histories that were terrible, that my grandparents and my great grandparents, each time they told them, they started crying. These people that invoke the nonsense of separation and violence, they don't have an idea of what they're calling for. They don't know the echo of a bomb, not the huge silence of the absence of a loved one. In Italy, in each plaza, there's a monument of from 500 to 1,000 names of soldiers who died in the war, and each time I go there, I look my last names in at least 5 or 6 of my great uncles who weren't able to come back, and that's not the scenery that I want to happen here. Here it is not about taking a side. Here the only side that should be taken is the side of no war, the side of peace. When my father in Italy it was unmistakable the steps that he took in Venezuela, but more the steps that he left to Italians by showing them and talking to them about Venezuela. The house was adorned with pictures of Canaima, they also have a Venezuelan piranha that was desiccated. There were things of Venezuela everywhere. He helped build the airport of Canaima, and he was many things. He was fascinated, and he loved Venezuela not as much as he loved the Hamaca or Maraca. So much that it was that love for that homeland he turned into a Venezuelan. He renounced. When he was very sick, he took one last decision. He was very sick there in Italy, and he asked to come back to Venezuela. He wanted to die, not in the country that saw him be born, but in the country that gave him a life. And of course, we made that dream come true, and now he is in Venezuela under this beautiful sky. He's resting in peace. I want to reach old age, but I don't want war to steal my future, and I want to get to old age, but to die in peace, not by a bomb. I have a Venezuelan son of 18 years who is studying to be a pilot, by the way. He loves his country. I have a wonderful wife who is also a mosaic of different cultures. She's Venezuelan with ascendants of Portugal, Spanish, and Mexican. She's a beauty of a woman, but with a very strong character. It's not easy. I don't ask of her to stand up because then she will make me pay for it. In few words, what we want here is understanding. We want peace. The only thing that I have to say in the community of Venezuelan that are international is thank you, Venezuela, for life. Thank you, Venezuela, for the opportunity that our only flag always is that of meeting and peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venezuela, for the opportunity. Those were the words of Marco Maurizio Mannochio, who spoke during the Council for Sovereignty and Peace on behalf of the foreign community of the country. In his remarks, he pointed out that Venezuela opened its hands for migrants, all of them, and gave them a future without asking where they came from. Most of that foreign community living inside Venezuela that flee conditions, circumstances of war, driven by warfares in Europe, also in the Middle East as well. Venezuela has been a safe space for these migrants that came without nothing but their dignity, and they found a homeland, they found a safe space to grow, to raise a family, and to grow as persons as well. And now they are saying these are not times for choosing sides.
Thank you for your moving words. As part of the actions that will be taken by the Council of Peace on Sovereignty, it is to organize the International Convention of Jurists and Academics for the Right to Peace with the participation of international experts